Folks, welcome to Tabletop Tactics with myself, Lawrence, and today my co-host, Mr. Beard.
Yes.
Sometimes called Joe. Never, in fact. So, we are doing a reactionary video to the all-new Games Workshop released Grand Tournament Series mission pack, I should say event pack, for the US tournaments, which are now kicking off again in the States as COVID restrictions are easing further.
I think it's Orlando, New Orleans, and
is it Texas as well?
Austin.
Austin, yeah, which is in Texas, yeah. Perfect. So how interesting, how exciting events are starting up again.
Hooray!
Yay! But now what GW are doing is they're releasing their official event pack, and it's got terrain layouts in it.
Who would have thought?
This is like revolutionary from Games Workshop. I mean, this is very now like LVO-esque, all of the majors that you'd get in the States and the UK, to be fair. This is now having some sort of a plan for the mats.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to Warhammer World and you might fight on a board with 3 pieces of terrain, or you might fight on a board with 15 pieces of terrain. You know, this is like all of the boards are going to have at least in some combination the same amount of pieces, and so that's quite interesting. So in case you haven't heard this on the interwebs, you'll have a link of it to link you to the pack on Warhammer Community below. So okay, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss this, aren't we?
Yes.
We're going to discuss this.
Yes, we are.
Now there are 2 examples in this terrain pack. Now, despite the difference in the 2 examples, they are in fact all the same terrain pieces, just reshuffled.
Yeah.
Not even that much, to be honest.
It's variety's sake.
It's variety's sake.
In the bump, it's sort of talking about how they want event organizers to have to give a very varied experience rather than doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Now, however, having said that, there are consistencies between all of these pieces of terrain. So let's go over the 4 bits of terrain, which are the big LOS blockers. You've got 4 large, what they call buildings, ruins, and these things are obscuring, okay? They also, however, have the other keywords, which are area terrain, scalable, breachable, light cover, defensible, and of course obscuring, as I've said. So these are big infantry, even, well, you can even hide vehicles behind them, to be fair. Bits. The examples given on this layout, you'll see, take up a large portion of the board. You then have, say again?
Most of it, in fact.
Most of it, in fact. You then have 2 medium-size versions of this, which are also line of sight blocking. So this is now 6 actually pretty large line of sight blocking bits of terrain on the board. You'll see examples of us actually we've created the layout as it would be on our own table. Then what you have is terrain piece number 3, and there's 4 of them, and these are your dense cover.
Yeah.
So this could be things like gantries, the Mechanicus terrain from Games Workshop, could be trees in theory, could be small ruins, the ruined walls, and they're placed either in the corners of the board, or in example 2, you've got like a cross, the centers of each board edge. Yeah. Those are the 2 layouts they've given an example of. What do you think?
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about if you have like a widthways deployment or a lengthways deployment, it's going to be a very, very different game. So if you're looking at widthways deployment, you can actually see a fair bit. Lengthways, you can't see anything for the most part. I think if the intention is to have turn 1 where you can't see very much, mission accomplished, because that definitely works.
Even really for any of the deployment types, it's actually pretty hard to see, I think, most of the enemy.
Yeah, I'd say
you can hide a lot of your stuff, like the vast majority, I would say.
Yeah. And bear in mind the examples you're seeing with ours, so we've got a mixture, on the big LOS blocking pieces of terrain, you've got a mixture of very dense terrain model, and then we've got some smaller broken walls to make the square shape that they suggest doing. So if you think about that as just being all LOS, you really can't see very much.
No.
At all.
No. And also what's interesting is because the map is so densely laid out. What do you think things like vehicles and tanks, if you don't have the fly keyword, is kind of what I'm getting at here, or the infantry keyword, because all of these terrain bits are actually scalable and breachable.
Yes.
So in my opinion, it sort of really favors infantry.
Exactly.
You know, and if you're assault-based infantry, you're going to absolutely love it as well.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, like, I don't know, say you're an Astra Militarum player or a Knights player, you know?
If you're rocking anything that ignores line of sight, this is a good time for you. So if you're an Imperial Guard player, bring your Manticores, bring your Wyverns, bring your Basilisks, because it doesn't matter. You can just park them all the way up, right at the back of your deployment, and not really worry too much about them being shot off the board in turn 1, unless you're facing some kind of weird air wing or you're facing another guard army. That's going to be good for you. I think any vehicles that are designed to deliver infantry will be okay here, because you can go far enough, you can then allow your infantry models to deploy essentially through the terrain, again keeping them protected, so that's kind of good. But in terms of armies that really rely on vehicles, like, I don't know, Chaos Space Marines or Iron Warriors, for instance, as an example for me, gonna be tough. It's
an interesting one, because the Guard, like as you said, they've got some great choices for like ignore line of sight weaponry. And I think, you'll be looking to Wyverns even more, and things like, well, Manticore was already amazing anyway. But you still need the ability to get out there on those objectives. And generally, I know people have looked at the moment with, like, if you're taking Guard as an example, you could just go the massive meat factory, the meat grinder, and just have guardsmen upon guardsmen upon guardsmen, or you could try and deliver them via chimeras. This will be a lot more restrictive with where your vehicles can go, because you've basically got these roads or lanes or places in between these buildings. A couple of questions I sort of have around this layout, and it will be really interesting to me, because obviously Games Workshop, they'll only use their own terrain, right? Let's face it, they're going to be using all of their own plastic kits. At this point, there's no place for cargo containers, which used to be quite a popular tournament terrain piece. It seems to all be ruins, trees, or the ruined walls sort of thing, or Mechanicus gantries rather. What would be interesting to me is, are they planning on putting these things on bases? Or is the area terrain going to be the imprint of these walls? It's
an interesting one. I think your point about it all being Games Workshop terrain is very valid, because this is a huge investment. Those middle pieces of terrain are huge. They are massive, and in terms of being able to set all of this up quickly, you're going to sort of need them on boards. I think, and also to deal with any potential issues between opponents with what is line of sight blocking and what's not. You kind of have to be able to show where the area terrain is very easily, to avoid judges being called over every 5 minutes because there's a disagreement on whether you can see something or not. So I think there needs to be a very clear line for area terrain, if nothing else.
I agree. I mean, that's a funny thing with tournaments. Like, whilst the terrain rules, I think, in Ninth are much clearer than they were in Eighth. You know, unless you're going to build if they're going to build like single large L shapes out of their ruins, that will be easier. But if they're going to try and connect them with some smaller parts, unless they're on a base, you know, things can get knocked, or you come over to the, I don't know, I mean, I'm really interested to see an actual example, because right now they've got a picture of an example, you know, they've drawn, this is where we'll place the terrain, but they've got no pictures of the actual terrain being used. I can see these, I'd be very, again, like these 4 large LOS blocks, if you're at something like the LVO, you're looking at big L shapes. I imagine, I'm going to guess that maybe Games Workshop will try and do the same thing, but in the pictures that we've got an example of, they seem to have some box shapes, don't they? Because you can see these black lines within the I'm guessing they intend for that whole thing to be area terrain, which again would indicate to me that maybe it's going to be on a base.
Well, there's on the examples, they've got like a 3-sided square, I guess. So I suppose that
they're not L's.
No, I think they're going to have sort of like a front and a back and 2 sides, and I suppose that maybe like a ruined side on another side.
It would be interesting to see what they mean by that.
Because but going by the diagram they provided, it's essentially 4 big squares, 2 rectangles, and 4 small squares.
So you would have seen us as we're talking here, examples of us replicating what the GW, what we believe the GW intention is for a tournament layout. We're actually going to play a few games with it as well. Battle reports coming up, including our league series where we play more competitively. So that'd be interesting to give it a go. But yeah, I think it's right. First things first. I actually think it is really good to have a standard terrain layout, because that way you're going to have some consistency with your games. You know, nothing's worse than, say you're running like an assault army or something and you happen to draw a board which doesn't really have very much LOS blocking terrain, you just get blown off of it. You know, at least you can know that you're going to get a consistent experience across every single game you play in an event. The other thing I would say though is that, yeah, the meta will start to evolve around it. I think unless you've got fly, I think a lot of heavy tank armies are not going to do as well. They're going to have a lot of restriction in their movement. This is based on not seeing them put together any actual kits themselves yet. We're only going by these diagrams. So I wonder if it might be too restrictive for them. Having said that, this will make it exciting.
I think so, yeah.
You're not going to get like a turn one, I blow you off the board.
No.
You know, type scenario here.
And even if you do have an army with lots of vehicles to fly, if you go first, move them up, you'll probably still not be able to see anything. Yeah, well, you won't be able to draw lines on everything. Then your opponent's turn one, just move out a little bit, and then boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, which is exciting.
It's on paper, it looks very, very, very simple and far too simple. But actually, when you think about the intricacies of your particular army and what you might be facing and the current meta, I mean, it does give a pretty even playing field, and I don't really see a huge advantage to anyone. Not like an outstanding advantage to any kind of army at the moment.
No, I think armies might even evolve based on knowing that this isn't what the terrain layout is. And because this is the other thing that I was thinking, it's inevitable. Like the tournament scene almost inevitably ends up influencing the casual play. Like, oh, this is what tournaments use for terrain, so it must be balanced, right? And so what the casual player will then go, well, okay, well, if this represents what's supposed to be a balanced board, then we'll do something similar to that, you know, and then jazz it up and add some narrative bits as you like. So I think it will be interesting to see now if the meta does change because of this terrain layout, whether people start favouring even more infantry. They sort of step away from tanks and or other vehicles which otherwise wouldn't be able to move through that terrain. It will be interesting to see how that pans out. I am excited about it. I'm really excited that Games Workshop are actually taking a step towards having some sort of official tournament pack, actually. Because remember, this is still, you know, if we rewind 5 years ago, this was never happening, you know, with Games Workshop. So they're actually really supporting the tournament scene with this stuff as well, which is quite exciting to see them do that. Yeah, we're going to play some games. We're going to play some games with it because we haven't actually used it ourselves yet. We've just set it up for your viewing pleasure. It'll be interesting to see if our thoughts change perhaps after we've used it for a little bit.
It's going to be interesting. I think some of the other nice things in the pack is that it does show that Games Workshop have an idea of what they want these tournaments to be. There's a big emphasis on it being fun. There's a big emphasis on everyone having a consistent but also a varied experience in terms of the tables being different every single time. There's very clear instructions on how armies should be painted. And there's also some little niggly things like what base sizes stuff should be on. So they're saying that we get that some of your armies might be on the older size bases, but where possible, put them on what comes in the current kits. Because there is, even for us, a lot of the time there's confusion about, well, we made this model ages ago and the base is wrong. Or this model, do you measure to the hull, do you measure the base? So it looks like they're really trying to get rid of all of the weird little creases and nuances and things, and just trying to put an emphasis on fun, but also giving us the tools we need for a competitive arena.
Which is nice, which is really nice. Well, look, I don't think there's anything else to add. You know, these are our first impressions of it. We've given you some examples of what the layouts could look like, and you'll actually see some examples in upcoming games as well, because why not? Let's try it out, right? So hopefully you guys have found that interesting. Let us know what your thoughts are. Maybe you're a competitive player and you think, oh, I think this might be too much, or actually I think it's a good step in the right direction, but they could go further. I do think my final thoughts on it would be, I actually really love it overall. I'm interested, given knowing how GW operate, like as in they're going to only use their own kits. I'd be very interested to see what the boards look like, given actually from a terrain point of view, GW doesn't really have that much variety in terrain. Not really, in my opinion.
And also, some of the terrain that they do they still sell the craters?
Yeah, like they do. And
Craters aren't in the pack.
There's no place for craters in the pack.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. They're sort of limiting themselves.
Because you can't make craters dense, right?
Yeah.
So unless they put, like they put some ruins, some of the ruined walls on a crater.
Yeah.
Well, they could do that.
Maybe.
But again, like they're probably going to have to like stick them to a base or something, which, I mean, it's gonna. I'm really curious. I'm really curious to see how they pull it off. I'm excited because no doubt they'll have a bunch of beavers somewhere painting all this stuff up, you know, getting it ready. Because they're going to need a lot of this.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, look, we'll see how this pans. I'd love to hear what you guys think. What do you think the state of play is with this? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Would you change anything? Let us know in the comments. We'll answer you back.
Yes.
So, folks, until next time, I've been Lawrence. This has been Beard, and we'll see you soon.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Because you have to report.
Yeah.
Given.
Yeah. Yes.
No.